Hi everyone, this is Dr. Ken Cliff with your Week 4 Educational Research Lecture Recap. This week we were talking about qualitative design, so for the next 15 minutes I'm going to take you through a range of qualitative designs, give you some examples from the research literature, as well as talk to you a little bit about what we need to do for assignments 2A, 2B and 3. So these were the 6 papers that I presented on, so you can see that they're grouped into our 3 big qualitative designs. So there was 2 papers about narrative, there was 2 further papers about multiple case study, and 2 furthers on ethnography. So each of these papers used this type of qualitative design in terms of its research design and in terms of answering its research questions. I'm going to present a couple of these today. And for each of the example, I'm going to go through the problem or the gap in the literature. I will talk about a research question or the main research question that was answered in each of the research studies. I'll talk about the design that was chosen and provide some detail as to how the authors justified the selection of that design. I'll go through some of the data collection details and some quick findings. And if you just step back for a second, you'll actually see that this is the kind of structure that you'll need to be thinking about for your 3rd assignment. So the way that I've tried to set this up today is to have it mimic the kind of process you'll need to think and work through for your 3rd assignment in week 10. So to get us started, experiences that shape teacher identity. This is a narrative study, came out of South Africa. It's a relatively recent one, and it looks at teachers' real life experiences and how those experiences, particularly in the field of education, shape their teaching identity. So the problem was that there's growing acceptance of the use of narratives as a means of teachers critically reflecting on practice and to help them do identity work with their students. However, there's little narrative research into how teachers' own experiences as learners shapes their future practice. So part of this is actually looking at how is teachers' experiences as learners in schools, as learners at the university level, and even as learners as teachers, that is through professional development and so on. How do those experiences of learning impact on our professional identity in terms of what we think a teacher should do, how the teacher should do that, what we think is effective or best practice. So how do teachers' true life experiences of teaching and learning in 3 aspects of their lives, namely as school learners, as tertiary students and as teachers, influence their current educational practices? And the design and why was a narrative design, and they argue that it provides a richness and a depth in relation to participants' own accounts. They also note that it's useful when asking people to recall long past events. So part of the usefulness of this was the idea that through this narrative design, particularly focusing on interviews but also incorporating other data collection, the idea was that they would be able to get at these experiences from people's lives, perhaps as far back as primary school and high school, which had been formative for them in shaping their teaching identity. I gave the example that one of the reasons that I always make sure that we have our notes for lectures up on our Moodle page, and so that everyone can have those notes in front of them, is actually from my first year as a university student. In my PE degree, we had to study anatomy as a subject, and the way that anatomy was taught was essentially a 2-hour lecture, as I recall, or it might have been 2 times 1-hour lectures, and they just, the lecturers just stood out the front and they just had literally PowerPoint slide after PowerPoint slide after PowerPoint slide, and there was a 50% exam or something like that, and people just had to basically, write until their arms were going to drop off. You just had to write, try to copy everything was up on the board. And so I said that been particularly formative for me in terms of thinking through the pedagogy of a lecture and the fact that I didn't want people madly scribbling down every word that is on the slides, when in fact some of the things that I was saying or some of the things that I was asking them, some of those annotations may well have been just as important, if not more important, than what was on the slides. So a little example of how this sort of research would have worked and what kind of things it would have been drawing on. So data collection, 3 teachers enrolled in postgraduate course. They were purposefully sampled, and we've talked about this a number of times over the last 2 weeks, the idea that qualitative research uses purposive sampling, where we deliberately try to pick some differences often in terms of the people that are involved. So in this case, there was differences in terms of gender, how long they'd been teaching, so teaching experience, and as well as where they'd been teaching. Those sorts of issues were seen to be potentially important contextual issues. And they asked the teachers to recall aspects of their time as school students, such as pedagogy and testing, how universities shaped their ideas about teaching, teaching styles, curriculum change, outcomes-based learning, and about aspects of their practice now, things like discipline and leadership. Some quick findings. The 3 teachers provided recollections of being spoon-fed and rote learning, and this didn't interest them. This was not engaging, and they wanted their students to be more active learners in the class. They also noted the challenge, but also the excitement of moving to outcomes-based education, and the idea that this would be more learner-centered in nature, and that the teaching would hopefully reflect this. All spoke of their teaching training, their teaching degrees being of high quality, and they argued that lecturers might do more to engage with pre-service teacher previous experience of education by adopting the idea of critical reflection. That is, that we could do more in degrees such as yours to have you reflecting on the educational experiences that have been formative for you in terms of your teaching identity. The second one I wanted to look at, inclusive pedagogies in music education. Primary, all our students, I think, primary, early years and PE are all doing special education, I believe, at the moment. So this is a particularly relevant one for all of you. So the problem was argued that many countries are facing similar challenges in terms of social inclusion, and particularly in retaining disaffected learners, learners who are switching off or disinterested in school and our subjects. And they wondered whether music teachers working in challenging contexts are sufficiently trained and flexible. And in order to look at this, they used a multiple case study style design. How do teachers approach the challenges of inclusive pedagogy in music education was the research question. The design was multiple case study, which allows close study and comparison of cases, and they argued in their paper, we can't possibly understand our own classrooms until we've looked at those of others, and that the comparative element of this research has the potential to uncover the hidden assumptions that underpin what we do and do well in our classrooms. So they argued that these cases were important in terms of reflection, particularly in understanding the impact of certain contextual issues, but also in providing some ability to be able to generalise across a range of contexts. They used 4 different countries, Sweden, Spain, Australia and the UK, and looked at 1 teacher per country, a little bit like Robin Alexander's research that we talked about in week 3. Classroom observation and field notes, individual teacher interviews, and also videotaped lessons. So a range of data collection there, as you would expect in a multiple case study design. Participants were asked exploratory questions regarding their beliefs about teaching and learning music, and also their perceptions about how to create an inclusive approach in the classroom, and about their strategies that they were using to translate learning experiences into engagement and achievement. So lots of different ways of getting at inclusion as it was or wasn't happening in these classrooms. So some quick findings. Inclusion was most successful where experiences connected with students' personal biographies and interests. And I said for our primary and early years students who have been studying virtual school bags in educational sociology, that is the interests and areas of knowledge, understanding, experience that young people bring with them to the classroom. This was an interesting finding. It says that's really important in terms of connecting with students that we want to have feel included in our classrooms. They also said in some countries this involved departure or extension from or of the official curriculum. It was an interesting finding that the teachers that most understood the curriculum as prescriptive, that is, as telling teachers exactly what to do and how to do it, were the least likely to be able to practice inclusion. And part of this is because teachers who understand the curriculum as prescriptive are often quite busy trying to tick things off and move quickly through making sure they've checked all of the necessary curriculum areas, all the necessarily syllabus outcomes and how-tos and so on. And of course it takes something other than that, or not surprisingly, it takes something other than that for students to feel included. In this particular study around music, one of the things that they found was that it was extracurricular activities such as performance and concerts, and that ability for teachers to connect outside of the 40 or 50 minute school period or teaching and learning block, which was really important in inclusion. And they also said that teacher-student relationships in inclusive classrooms were marked by consistent and clear expectations for behaviour, which is a long-standing finding across a whole lot of different areas of discipline and classroom engagement. Students will respond well when teachers are consistent in terms of how they lay out expectations and enforce those expectations. Last one, misogyny and male rugby players. A little bit different. This one comes from a sporting kind of area, and this is actually an ethnographic study. And it was a study, if you don't know what the word misogyny means, it's actually means essentially a hatred or an intense dislike, a kind of loathing of women. The idea that women are less than men. This was a study of how this kind of attitude might be present in male rugby teams, and argued that sport is almost synonymously understood as male and masculine, that many studies look at how masculinity is constructed through sport, but not how femininity is simultaneously constructed, arguing that understanding how these two areas are constructed through sport allows us to better understand their social construction in society broadly. So the idea was that if sport is an important arena for the social construction of masculinity, what masculinity is, how you do it, how you don't do it, then it's probably at the same time an important place for constructing femininity and what that looks like. And so the researcher actually focused on, that is not the research question that the researcher focused on. The researcher used an ethnography. So the attending researcher role took an active membership role where researchers participated in the core activities in much the same way as members, yet they were holding back from committing themselves, or he was holding back from committing himself to the goal and the value of members. So in this ethnography, he was actually embedded with two rugby teams at two different universities, and he did everything. He trained with them, he played with them. What he didn't do was tell them that he was researching. So this is a really interesting study in ethics, and it's an interesting one to ask yourself if he had pursued informed consent. That is where these people had signed off on being part of the research, these rugby players. Would he have actually been able to answer his question? Would he have been able to get honest and accurate kind of views from them on masculinity and femininity and their views on each other and particularly on women? So he argued that no, he wouldn't have, and an ethnography and this type of ethnography was essential for him to understand the worldviews of the players. So the setting was two university rugby teams over successive years. It included coaches, players and other team members, and it took in data collection from observations and field notes as well. He was keeping a set of field notes and observations about trainings and matches and so forth. Some quick findings. Derogatory comments from senior to more junior players were regularly framed in terms of not measuring up to masculine ideals. That is, they tended to heckle each other, they tended to curse each other in ways that were about either femininity or about being homosexual. In Missouri, one of the research sites, an ultimate frisbee team practiced at the same time on an adjacent field, and they were continually used as an example of not measuring up to being true men. And if football players in practice were seen as doing something, that wasn't tough enough or not playing hard enough, they'd be compared to these ultimate frisbee players. Masculinity in this study was primarily designed as an overwhelming physical dominance, a disregard for well-being and health, and a dismissal of women as being less than men. So there are our three sets of papers today in terms of our big three qualitative research designs: narrative, multiple case study, and ethnography. As I said, in terms of assignment 3, you need to start thinking and structuring things in a similar kind of way. What's the problem or the gap in the literature? Hopefully your first assignment will help you with that. What's a research question that you could ask and answer? I'll talk to you about assignment 2B in just a moment, but that's going to see you starting to draft some research questions. What design have you chosen and why? And some details about data collections, as well as a little bit about some specific ethical considerations that are relevant to your specific study. So bear those things in mind for assignment 3. It's a little while away, but obviously this is a short semester and we're moving quite quickly. Hopefully this will be useful when you go to get started on that assignment. A little bit sooner than that though, we have assignment 2A and 2B. Week 7 assignments. Assignment 2A is a critical evaluation of 2 research articles, and that's 35%, and we'll submit that to Turnitin via the Moodle page. And assignment 2B is just a 5%er, and it involves developing a research question, and we'll just hand that in using the pro forma available on Moodle, and you'll be handing that in week 7 in tutorial to your tutor so they can try to turn it around as quickly as possible. We're aiming to have it back to you in week 8 if possible. Okay, let me go into 2A in a little bit more detail. So it's a critical evaluation of 2 research articles. Now, all of our assessments look to scaffold into each other, look to build onto each other. So in this instance, one of the first things that you should have is a good folder full of PDFs of good journal articles that you used in assessment 1. And so I'm certainly hoping that you can pull out 2 good primary sources from that folder. Very important that they be primary sources focusing on the topic that you're interested in, and very important that they have educational implications for the area you reviewed in assessment 1. So when you're looking for articles, really important that they be both primary and that they have those educational implications. You need to read and evaluate each article separately. I'll show you the subject outline in a minute, but it spells out for you exactly what you're expected to do in regards to each article. You then write a review paper. So it'll be structured using subheadings throughout. Really important that you use those subheadings to organise. And according to the subject outline, again, there's a minimum of 7 references here. So obviously you'll use the 2 papers. You'll also use research methods textbooks, such as your textbook, but also other ones, such as those available in the library, as well as other journal articles to comment on the methodology and design decisions, as well as to write the small background section, literature review style section, or possibly the educational implications section. And you'll submit this in via the Turnitin portal on the Moodle page. So if I just jump out of that for a second and flip into this one, this is one of the frameworks available on Moodle that you may be able to use to help you organise your critique. So there's a number of resources. They're up in a folder called Resources for Assignment 2A. I recommend you jump up there, have a look at what we've put up there for you. They have a whole lot of questions, a whole lot of headings as well to help you start taking notes and to structure how you might organise this particular review. The other thing is obviously make sure you go to the subject outline. In the subject outline, in the critical examination of research, the subject outline through this section here actually spells out a whole lot of the important things that you need to do. What is the focus of the researcher's work? Does the researcher adopt a design that is appropriate? Are the researcher's methodological decisions appropriate? Do you agree with the interpretation? And then on the basis of those notes that you'll take, you'll actually have to write up the paper, and some details for how you might write that up are included here. So really important that you refer to these resources as you're working your way through this assignment. If I just go back to my slideshow again, For 2A, those resources are up there. There's 4 resources that you might take a look at that might be useful. For 2B, 2B is only a small assignment, just a 5%er. The Moodle page has a pro forma for completing this, so download the pro forma template and make sure you save it. Give it a name, because a template file needs to be saved as a name on your own computer rather than kept as a template. Using your knowledge of the gaps in your area, notes from class and the textbook, write 2 research questions you could use for assessment 3. Using the pro forma, you should also indicate a potential research design for each question and briefly justify the question based on your findings in assessment 1. So pretty straightforward there. The pro forma will help you structure that and get that organised, but it's very important you get that to us in a timely fashion so that we can turn it around for you with enough time to think about that and use it to inform your planning for assessment 3. Okay, that's the end of my little recap for this week. I hope it's been helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in week 6. Have a happy Easter. Bye.